I remember the exact moment my world tilted so sharply I thought I'd never find my balance again. We were gathered at the Harpers' sprawling backyard, strings of Edison bulbs stretched between ancient oaks, laughter drifting across picnic tables piled high with potato salad and pulled pork. My in-laws beamed with pride at their daughter's beautiful celebration of reconciliation, as they called it. My wife Julia and I were finally back on track after our rough patch. Their eyes glittered in the soft light, but I saw something else there, anticipation perhaps, or hunger for drama. I'd already endured too much that afternoon, my two toddlers at my side, sticky with cupcakes and promise of bedtime, while distant relatives asked me when I'd return to my real job, the corporate role I'd left 2 years ago to start my own consulting firm. I'd smiled and nodded, though my heart had thudded at each question. I'd explained the following year I'd taken to rethink my career, but I heard the unspoken conclusion: I'd become a failure. Still, I tried to enjoy the warm breeze, the gentle hum of cicadas, my son chasing fireflies with his cousins, my daughter clutching my pant leg with her sticky-fingered grip. I watched Julia float between groups of aunts and old college friends, her laughter bright, her hair catching the light. I felt a swell of love, that familiar surge when I saw her smile, and then I heard it. "William," she called, approaching with a drink in one hand, a rigid smile on her lips. "Come here." I rose, juggling my daughter on one hip, and followed her through a ring of chairs where my wife's cousins hovered. I recognized their faces, attendees from the rehearsal dinner disaster, silent witnesses to her pleading tears, and my awkward excuses. Why were they here again? She stopped in the center of the circle and set her glass down with force. The berries rattled against the rim. "You," she said, looking me in the eye. "Get down on your knees." A hush fell so deep I could hear the cicadas hush, the wind catch its breath. I stared at her as though she'd grown horns. My daughter tugged my shirt, confused. I knelt, sweat prickling my forehead. "Beg me for forgiveness," Julia declared, voice steady, as if rehearsed. "Like you did at the spa retreat, remember? On your hands and knees, prostrate before me." I froze. The crowd inhaled, my own family, her family, our friends, waiting for me to obey. The echoes of the Napa spa retreat's humiliation shattered in my mind. The weekend she'd dragged me to heal, our marriage after my burnout, where I'd been coaxed into a circle of strangers, to admit my sins, confess my failures, and grovel for her grace. 3 years later, she wanted the same performance, in front of everyone. "I can't," I said finally, voice strangled. Her lips tightened. "Oh, yes you can." She leaned forward. "Kneel. Apologize for your selfishness. Apologize for how you forced me into that retreat. Apologize for how you ruined my trust." My son began to wail, startled by the tension. Cousins nudged each other, faces pale. My father-in-law squared his shoulders, a loyal look in his eyes. My mother-in-law's expression flickered between anger and embarrassment. The circle pressed in, an audience craving the spectacle. I closed my eyes. My daughter sobbed on my hip. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. I looked at Julia, her posture perfect, her eyes cold, lips drawn thin. I saw something dangerous in her face, a surgeon's detachment as she waited to carve out my shame. "I won't do it," I said, standing. Silence broke like glass shards. Aunts gasped, cousins murmured. The two toddlers slipped from my arms and scampered away, drawn by the fireflies. I swallowed. "I won't apologize like that. Not here, not now." Julia's jaw clenched, her voice curdled. "Fine." She turned on her heel and walked away, heels clicking. The crowd shifted, uncertain. My father-in-law hurried to Julia's side. Everyone else scattered, footsteps skittering like fleeing birds. I watched the retreat of her back, the bright dress brushing the grass, the finality in her shoulders. I heard my own heartbeat, loud as a drum, and then I saw it. The thinning circle of spectators turned away. I realized this gathering, the reunion, the kumbaya, the makeup party had been a trap. Julia had set me up to collapse publicly, to grovel, to break. When I refused, she had nothing more to say. Somewhere in that moment, I felt free, free of her chains, her demands, her performances, free of the replay of past humiliations, free of an audience that only cared for drama. I looked down at my shaking hands. The toddlers' laughter echoed from the firefly field. I knelt, not for her, but to scoop my children into my arms. They clung to me, giggling at the dancing lights. I stood and left the circle of chairs behind. The picnic tables abandoned, the empty wine glasses and strewn napkins. I walked past the caterers packing boxes, past cousins exchanging bewildered glances, past my in-laws who stood frozen amid the aftermath. I didn't look back. I disappeared that night. I left my phone on the kitchen counter at home, beside the half-empty bottle of scotch Julia had poured herself. I slung a small duffel over my shoulder and walked out the door, one toddler asleep in my arms, the other clutching my coat with sticky fingers. I got into my sedan and drove north, toward the mountains I'd once climbed on a college break. My sanctuary, my place to think free of delegates and deadlines, expectations and endless scrutiny. For 2 days, I camped by a rushing creek, rain pattering on the tent, the children tucked into sleeping bags, oblivious to the storm blowing through our lives. I watched their chests rise and fall, innocent of the wounds inflicted by grown-up games. I remembered my own childhood camping trips with my father, the tales he told by firelight, the way he looked at me with pride. I missed him. I missed me. By morning of day 3, my plan had crystallized. I would not beg for forgiveness. I would not crawl back in shame. Instead, I would strike back, swiftly, surgically, irreversibly. I would deliver a dose of truth so potent, it would blow open every secret Julia and her conspirators harbored. I would ignite a chain reaction that might burn their gilded lives down to ashes. I returned to civilization under cover of darkness. I used a burner phone and a prepaid laptop tethered to a mobile hotspot. No traceable IP, no digital footprint. I reached deep into the things Julia thought she'd hidden: forged deeds, offshore accounts, incriminating texts with her first husband. I sifted through years of emails I'd quietly backed up, letters she'd destroyed, receipts for cash, withdrawals she'd pretended were reimbursements. Everything that might expose her polished facade as a house of cards. I built a dossier that would land in my in-laws' inboxes simultaneously, in Julia's law firm, where she was a partner, in every keyboard meeting at the nonprofit she volunteered for, in the email thread of her most prized circle of friends. A digital bomb containing the truth: how she'd siphoned charity funds to pay for cosmetic surgery, how she'd ruined her first marriage with a clandestine affair, how she'd orchestrated public humiliations of me as practice for more brutal power plays. I added in the recorded audio my refusal at the family gathering, her commands to grovel, the hush of the assembled vultures, so they'd hear the real story, not the sanitized version she would spin. I redacted my children's names and any personal data that might harm them. My revenge was against her, not the innocent. I scheduled the release, precisely 8 p.m., the following evening, coinciding with Julia's firm's gala event, where she would be on stage accepting an award for community leadership. The perfect stage for her downfall. Then I vanished again, this time leaving no trace but a one-line message on her voicemail: check your inbox at 8. That afternoon, I sat in a nondescript cafe, one she'd never suspect, watching the clock tick toward the moment of impact. Across from me, my 2 children doodled on napkins, lost in crayons. I ordered hot chocolate for them, and a strong espresso for myself. My hands trembled as I reviewed the sent email confirmations: delivered, opened, scheduled. On the screen, I saw the first notification: your report at her law firm had been opened by j.harper@eastmanlaw.com. Seconds later, family update flagged in my in-laws' joint account. Then charity audit, landing in the inbox of the nonprofit's CFO. And finally, board whistleblower in the thread of her inner circle. My heart pounded as the clock struck 8. My coffee cooled. I felt the ripple of digital shockwave begin: 10 openings, then 50, then hundreds. I closed my eyes. I'd done it. I detonated the missile at her feet. At that moment, a soft tug at my sleeve. I looked down to see my daughter, holding a crumpled napkin. She'd drawn 2 stick figures, one larger, one smaller, smiling under a bright sun. I felt tears welling. This was why I'd fought back, to protect them from a world where power was wielded as a weapon, where kings demanded submission. I scooped them both into my arms and kissed their heads, warm and real. Outside, the world was shifting, the prelude to chaos. Inside me, a storm was calming. I had seized my dignity back. The family gathering had set me up to beg. I'd refused, and now, days before her gala, the dossiers would force her to confess to friends, family, colleagues. She would fall, but I would remain hidden, at least until the dust settled, until I knew my children and I were safe from the fallout. Later, late that night, I would watch from a high-rise apartment I'd rented under an alias, streaming the live feed from her gala. I'd watch her face when the projection behind her flickered to that first email, bored whistleblower, immediate action required. I'd watch the gasps, the phone calls, the retreat of her allies, as they realized the Golden Empress wore no clothes, and in that moment, I would understand the true meaning of nuclear revenge. Not simply to destroy, but to expose, to cast light on every dark secret, to demand accountability, to reclaim power that had been stolen from me. I sat alone in the 42nd floor rental apartment, the city lights flickering below like fallen stars. My laptop lay open on the glass coffee table, its screen black now, the report files I'd sent safely encrypted and gone from view. My heart hammered, pulse echoing in my ears. Across the room, my children slept in sleeping bags, the gentle rise and fall of their breathing. A balm in the quiet. Tomorrow they'd wake asking for pancakes, cartoons, Legos, oblivious to the storm I'd unleashed. Tonight I allowed myself one moment of stillness. At exactly 8:15 p.m., the first pings arrived, a notification on my burner email, then on my private account. Screenshots floated through my mind. Julia's firm inbox filling with bored whistleblower, demands her parents' joint Gmail, lighting up with family financial disclosures, and the nonprofit's CFO inbox, bloating with charity audit findings. I'd watched them open, one by one. I'd seen the cursor hover over each subject line, that moment of decision before revelation. Then I'd seen the world tilt under their fingers. But to truly witness the fallout, I needed to be at ground zero. I closed my laptop and stepped onto the balcony. Downtown, headlights snaked beneath skyscrapers, the hum of distant traffic like an exhale. In the distance, I could see the harbor's faint glow. I tucked my hands into my coat pockets. I had a plane to catch, one to a city where my surname wasn't yet tainted, where I could rebuild. Before I left, though, I needed to see her endgame, Julia's gala, her crowning moment as Community Leader of the Year. They'd been streaming it live for months, fundraiser after fundraiser. Tonight was her moment. I pulled up the live stream on my phone, cradling my daughter's abandoned stuffed bear in my free hand. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Convention Center was roaring at 8:30 p.m. when Julia took the stage. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. A packed audience leaned forward in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The host, a polished TV anchor, smiled broadly as he introduced her. And now please welcome our honoree, Julia Harper, for her tireless work in social justice and philanthropy. Julia stood at the lectern, a pillar of poise, her gold-sheathed dress shimmering. She began her acceptance speech, voice clear, rehearsed, "Thank you all for this incredible honor. I share it with my team." Then behind her, the giant projector flickered. The thank you music sputtered out. In its place, bold letters appeared. Bored whistleblower, urgent. The spotlight swung off Julia, illuminating a silent slideshow. Email #1. From whistleblower@anonymous.org to board@charity.org with subject charity funds misallocated. The image. A scanned receipt for a $15,000 hospital bill for her private surgery, paid from the charity's account. Email #2. From audit@eastmanlaw.com to partners@eastmanlaw.com with subject ethics complaint. Partner J. Harper. The attachment, the forged complaint she'd filed against me, her handwriting all over it. Email #3. Screenshots of text messages between Julia and her ex-husband, confessing "I still love you, and let's meet at 8 p.m. the night before our own gathering." Email #4. Scanned deed transfers showing offshore holdings in her name, not the charity's. A collective gasp rolled through the audience. Murmurs rippled like wind through reeds. On stage, Julia's face drained of color. She clutched the lectern as if it were a lifeline. Behind her, the slides cycled in an endless loop. The host stammered, "Ladies and gentlemen, technical difficulties." He stepped back, eyes wide. Journalists in the front row snapped photos. Flashbulbs popped. Phones rose like a tide, recording every moment. Julia gathered herself and raised her hand. "Please let me." But the projector switched to a new slide. Confession recording. Audio. The speakers crackled to life with my voice. "I won't beg for forgiveness." Then hers, "Beg me for forgiveness." Then mine. "I won't do it. Not here." Then the hush of the crowd. The final seconds caught her command. "Get down on your knees." Tears streamed down Julia's taut cheeks. She let go of the lectern and backed away, unable to speak. The audience watched her transformation from revered leader to exposed fraud, an empress stripped of her cloak. Security moved toward the stage. Julia turned on her heel and fled through the side door. The host sank to his knees, shaking his head. An assistant rushed to unplug the projector. The lights flickered and dimmed. Orderlies ushered guests out, chatter swelling into chaos. And I watched it all from my screen, heart pounding, satisfaction tempered by a sharp pang of sadness. I'd won. She'd fallen, but at what cost? The next day, the hashtags trended: #Harper scandal, #whistleblower, #CharityGate. Dozens of articles popped up. The Daily Ledger's high society stars fall from grace. The Chronicle's inside the boardroom betrayal. The Legal Brief's law firm ethics investigation launched. Screenshots of the slides were everywhere. TV news anchors replayed the audio of her commands in horror. I woke at dawn to a call from my father. "Son, did you see?" He held back tears. "We're so sorry. We had no idea. We should have." I cut him off gently. "I know." Then my sister-in-law called, voice cracking. "You saved those kids." She was going to... I don't even know. "Thank you." By lunch, Julia's law partner had issued a press statement. "Effective immediately, Miss Harper is placed on administrative leave pending investigation. We are cooperating fully with authorities." The charity's board met in emergency session. The CFO was suspended. The board chair resigned. Her name was Mud. An email from Julia arrived in my burner account at 10:03 a.m. "William, I know it was you. I know you hate me. I want to explain." I deleted it without reading. No explanation would ever undo the betrayal she'd inflicted on me, on us. That afternoon, I went to the park alone. No kids, no distractions. I sat on a bench overlooking the pond and let the spring breeze carry away my tension. I realized that the nuclear option I'd deployed was the only way to break the cycle of humiliation she'd constructed. I grieved the loss of our marriage, but I also felt the birth of something else. The promise of a life I could shape without her manipulations. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers were filed. Julia contested custody, but the court saw her pattern of control, her games as the judge put it, and granted me full physical custody with visitation rights. She'd lost her career, her volunteer positions, her board seats. The nonprofit board called a press conference to announce a new era of transparency and trust, pledging to return every misallocated dollar. That morning, I signed the final decree in my attorney's office. My kids, bright-eyed, giggling, oblivious, waited outside with their nanny. When I emerged, I scooped them into my arms and felt the world settle on its axis again. Over pancakes that evening, my son asked, "Daddy, will Mommy still come for dinner?" I held his sticky hand and looked at my daughter's hopeful eyes. "She will," I said, "but only when she's earned it." My daughter grinned. "We'll tell her to say she's sorry." I ruffled her hair. "And then we'll see." By midsummer, my consulting business was thriving. Free from the invisible leash of corporate politics, I'd landed 2 major clients who valued my straightforward honesty and fresh ideas. I hired an assistant, rented a small loft for my home office, and started mentoring other entrepreneurs, teaching them to build ventures on integrity, not image. On weekends, the kids and I camped in the woods, just like old times. We roasted marshmallows, read bedtime stories by lantern light, and I told them about the stars, how some stories crumble so that new constellations can emerge. One Saturday, I received a package at the door, a small journal, leather-bound, sent from an address I didn't recognize. Inside, a single page in Julia's handwriting. "To the man who refused to beg, I see now the cost of my pride. I'm sorry for the orders, for the lies, for the betrayals. I'm working to become someone worthy of forgiveness. Please know I carry that journal of yours with me. Yours, Jay." I closed the envelope and set it on my desk beside my children's drawings. I didn't need to respond. Her apology hung between us like a fragile bloom, waiting to unfurl. But forgiveness, true forgiveness, would come only when her actions, not just her words, proved that she'd changed. That evening, I looked through my window at the city skyline, silhouette of possibility against the dusk. The nuclear device I'd detonated had razed the lies to the ground. In their place, I was rebuilding, a career grounded in honesty, a home filled with laughter, and a heart that had learned the true cost and the true power of refusing to bow. I whispered into the fading light, "This is only the beginning." And as the first stars blinked awake, I knew I meant it.